All right, so it's 12:30. I think we can start. We are going to launch one-on-one with Ken and GSC. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at 12:30, September 3rd. My name is Ada Chen, and I'm the Education and Outreach Specialist for Campus Advocacy Network, which is a program of Women's Leadership and Resource Center. We do education outreach programming on gender-based violence, education, and prevention. And we also have direct services. And so I want to explain a little bit why we want to launch this interview. We have a special guest today. We are co-workers, colleagues, staff members, students, and faculty members, right? But we all play a role on campus. But we are more than that. And what this interview is about is for us to go beyond the facade and learn one another's stories. And let me emphasize, stories are the gifts that we give to one another. And we want to share our experiences. We want to get to know each other about our past. And this whole interview, it's like an open house. This is about intimacy, vulnerability, and we want to build our community. And I want to give it to my collaborator, Moises Villada. Moises, take it over.
Hello, everyone. So excited to be here live. My name is Moises Villada. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am the Associate Director at UIC's Gender and Sexuality Center, which is one of the 7 cultural centers on campus. We serve lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, plus communities, LGBTQA+. We are so excited, and I am so excited to introduce our guest today, who is Dr. Margaret Fink. Dr. Margaret Fink joined us in 2019 as the director of the Disability Cultural Center. She got her BA at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and her PhD at U of C. And I also know that she's very passionate, and her research really focuses on representation and disability. We are so excited to have you here, Margaret. And I'm going to have Ada take it away with the first question.
Very good. Thank you so much for joining us at Campus Advocacy Network and Gender and Sexuality Center. So, Margaret, I'm so excited to learn about you. We are all role models, right? We want to let our students know that we were once young adults, young people. We have made mistakes. So tell us, what were you like when you were a student? And you can go back to college or graduate school, you pick. What were you like? Tell us, what were you like when you were a student?
Okay, I'm unmuting myself. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to just have a chat and go down memory lane about college. That's what I've been thinking about the most. It's just like, as I'm looking back, I was a freshman in college exactly 20 years ago in the fall of 2000. And like Moises mentioned, I was at UW-Madison, and I grew up primarily in Wisconsin. I moved a lot growing up, but so it was like somewhat close to home. But let's see, I think the word, or like the idea that I'm trying to like capture to describe my time in college was, I was just super curious. Like, I was noticing all these new ideas, all these new kinds of things for the first time, and just kind of continually having my mind blown or like changed or opened. And so, I mean, that was probably the coolest, most exciting aspect of being in college for me. Yeah, that's the short answer.
Yeah, you're making me think of, one of the things that we always talk about with the people we encounter is the expansion of your horizons, right? So I really appreciate that comment. Is there anything that stands out of those things that really kind of, like you said, blew your mind, like that really kind of have informed the way you are navigating your world now? I know it could be a big question, but maybe one thing that stands out from your time in college.
No, I mean, yeah, totally, definitely. Certain things definitely pop up to me. One was reading a book called Slut! It had this like neon green and pink cover, and it was kind of like, it's a book about just thinking critically about some of the insults that are thrown around in high school and like even beyond that. Just basically disciplining people who are or are perceived as like being sexually active, and how that's like just deeply problematic at a really basic level. And kind of my introduction to feminism as like a way of analyzing something as opposed to just like women who want the same rights. And so that was really good for me. That was really formative. I just got a lot out of that book in terms of just how could you rethink some things that you take for granted. And I would say another major thing, we were chatting before we went live, and we were remembering when 9/11 happened. So that was the year 2001. That was my second year of college. And I remember a professor assigning an essay by Arundhati Roy about that. And to be completely honest, I don't remember a lot of the details of this essay, but I remember that it really helped me think about our country on a much broader scale in a way that kind of critiqued the way that, you know, imperialism happened. Like, we're just getting into some thoughts about violence, like state violence, colonial violence, how that has a lot of a huge ripple effect. I just had not learned to think about things that way until that happened. And then, yeah, I mean, I could go on. I really just, it was this experience of like, oh, that looks cool. I'm going to go check it out. And like really getting exposed to something that I just had not even been exposed to as a way of thinking, or maybe like a culture, or just, I was really getting my mind blown left and right.
You know, it's interesting. We kind of, when you were mentioning September 11th, you were a sophomore, right? You were young. We're talking about September 11th. That was my first year teaching at DePaul, my first semester, right? And started teaching before September 11th, and that completely changed the political landscape of our country. And it's interesting. You also mentioned about the book, Slot is, I view myself as a feminist when I was in Taiwan, and I didn't really grasp, right, the importance of, let's say, Black feminism until this country. So very similarly, our horizon completely, my own path coming to this country, our horizon, whether as a teacher, right, as a staff member on college campus, it's not just for students. Our horizon also are expanded. We think about things differently. Absolutely. What did you, for me, what did you find it most difficult to navigate during college? What was the sort of, what was the sort of mistakes or lesson that you learned?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm kind of thinking along two tracks. So
okay.
One thing that it was difficult, and it was just kind of a part of the experience, was just how radically my idea of what I thought I wanted to do and then what I ended up doing in terms of my major, that changed really dramatically. So I came in kind of thinking I loved chemistry in high school deeply. And so I was kind of invited to do these, like they were kind of fancy chemistry and math classes. They were so difficult. I was really over my head in the math, like completely. I just didn't know how to think about it. And there were some access issues happening that I would just kind of like, I didn't really know how to navigate. So like my math professor with calculus, it wasn't just solve the problem, it was like proofs. And so he would sort of like write on the chalkboard rapidly and apparently narrating all of it to the chalkboard. But I was like, I don't know, I'm just going to copy. I did not understand a thing. And I remember like I got a 33% on my first midterm, which was a C. in that class because it was just really difficult and heavily graded or curved. But yeah, I definitely kind of had this experience of thinking I was going to do science, and I was doing big chemistry class, big math class, really struggled in terms of like my grade and like feeling like I deeply understood things. I was just wading through trying to like make it work. And then I also had an arts and culture of ancient Greece class that was like, oh yeah, I might as well add something. I loved it. It was very like, it just came a little bit more easily to me. It was something that I figured out I really enjoyed thinking and learning about. And so I kind of shifted gears toward arts and culture. And I was like an art history major. Then I took an English class. And I was like, oh my gosh, my mind is blown. Like choosing exactly these words, putting together a story exactly this way, just like super powerful and interesting to think about. So anyway, that shift and like being willing to just have a certain plan that you thought was going to be the plan was definitely difficult, but I think that's like the thing that worked out for me is just feeling willing to change the plan and go with what felt the most interesting and like sustaining, generative for me.
I love that. And I love what you're saying about change and development. And what you're making me think of is that all of us are in cultural centers where we work around identities and our multiple intersecting identities. I'm curious about how your identity shifted or developed as you were navigating this college experience, because I think that's where a lot of our work happens, right? Like beyond high school, we go into different spaces, and some folks go to college, some folks don't, or take a break or whatever, or can't. And I'm wondering, what was your identity development around that time, if you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. That's kind of like, you know, I'm the director of the Disability Cultural Center now, so that's kind of what's been on my mind too. And I was really, I was like, I wasn't there yet in terms of being able to change my thinking on disability. I think when I was in college, I was still working with a lot of ideas that I had been exposed to and kind of living in all growing up, where, you know, oh, like the good thing is, yes, you're disabled, but you can't hardly tell. Or like, yes, you're disabled, but you're so, you know, good at school that it's okay. And like all of these ideas about minimizing my disability, or like it doesn't really matter, it's a good thing if you're kind of not needing to actually deal with it, not actually change something kind of major in terms of how the class is being done in order to get access. And I actually had this thing in grad school where I retroactively looked back at college and I was like, oh, like I was falling asleep in lecture every single time because I could not follow what was going on, you know, like I just did all the reading and so I did fine. But like it was also art history, so it was like dark and soft seats and like kind of like beautiful pictures. So I had a friend who would just be nudging me with her elbow every single class period to keep me awake because I was just like, I don't know what's going on, I'm not following. And I don't even think I realized it at the time. I thought I was just tired and I was falling asleep. But so anyway, that was interesting because in grad school, it meant I really had to grapple with when it was not working out for me. I could not access what the discussion was actually, and I needed to figure something out. So
can you give us an example? How did you eventually learn to advocate for yourself? I mean, I think some of the students of disabilities talk about how they have to advocate for themselves, right? really challenge the system and the status quo and the institutional barriers. Can you give us some example, or one example, what was the sort of switch that you realized you had to do that, and give us an experience that you had, that you advocate for yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I think that really came to a head for me actually in between college and grad school when I was teaching 8th and 9th grade. And that was a lot because I just really struggled with classroom management because, you know, like if I couldn't really tell that people were whispering or whatever, it just got really out of control really fast. And I'm not a phone user. I don't use voice phone. Texting kind of happened right as I was leaving college, so that was really good timing. But I think the way that people would sort of address issues with behavior was A, building trust, and I was new. So that was kind of like a little harder to do until I stuck around for a while. B, you know, calling parents, calling grandmother. And that was just something that I was just kind of like, I'm gonna avoid this because my disability needs to not mean anything. And so yeah, I think that the experience of like just actually hitting places where I couldn't just sort of avoid it and still do fine, like do the reading and doesn't matter, was a big turning point. And so then in graduate school, there would be these discussions where it was kind of bouncing back very rapidly, bouncing around from comment to comment very rapidly. And the level of discourse was very high, very specialized, a lot of jargon. And so it might be difficult to follow anyway. And if you were literally not catching what people were saying, it was definitely difficult to follow. So that was kind of a moment where I took a thing I had always done. I had always let people know, hey, I'm deaf. That usually included, so that means I'm going to sit at the front of the class. Period. That's it. But this time in grad school, I was kind of like, okay, this is not working for me. I need to go into it a little bit more. And so I like met with the dean of students and was like, hey, I need to figure out some accommodation. I don't actually know what to do because I've never used accommodations before. But this is what I think would work. And I was lucky to find someone who was kind of also new to it, so I to figure it out. Yeah, it was a process. It really was.
It's a journey, right? And you're making me think of we've all navigated different journeys, different adversity. And I'm really curious actually to learn from you, were there spaces that brought you comfort and joy when things got heavy, when things felt overwhelming? Like, what about your college journey? Were there moments or people or spaces that brought you comfort and joy that got you through some of this stuff?
I even have my Kleenex.
It's okay. Take your time. Take your time. We are allowed to cry in the space. Take your time. It's okay.
Not in college. So no, I think it was like getting into disability studies and going to some conferences, meeting more people who shared the same kinds of experiences, if not like exactly the same kind, that I started accessing those kinds of spaces. And it was really, really meaningful. And yeah, I mean, that's a big piece of what we're trying to make happen for people at the Disability Cultural Center. And it's been so gratifying. It's been really amazing. Even just to be part of a staff that kind of gets it on a certain level that it's just rare. And then just being able to build spaces for other people who are at varying places in their own, you know, process of like figuring it out. Ada was like, Margaret, you should cry. I told everybody I was going to maybe cry.
It's okay. You know, it's a, but if I started crying, that's you making me cry as well. You know, I really appreciate you sharing this with us, because it is, when I started to cry, that's me being Ada. I cry all the time. But, you know, it's even, you know, throughout this whole process of making this interview work, Moises and I, right? We also made assumptions. We were also ableist in our own way of handling things, and we have to learn. And I think what you point out, you know, the importance of community, right? Of finding people with shared experiences. That's part of what cultural centers are about, right? With similar experiences. But what you also point out, and what I'm learning, is that it doesn't necessarily mean that one has certain experiences of oppression or disadvantages will automatically translate that, right, to another experience, right? So for example, you know, I can talk about, you know, the racial identity or being an immigrant, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I automatically translate my own understanding of my oppression, right, with race or immigration status or gender, to automatically do the work, right, on issues about access and disability. And so I really appreciate that, you know, that you advocate for yourself throughout this whole process. So Moises and I are learning, right, as well, and we need to do better. So I really appreciate that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. It's something we think about a lot, like something that we're thinking about a lot, because there are, I'm thinking about there's all these interlocking systems of privilege and oppression, which you taught me to add that word privilege, you know, and they operate similarly to similar ends in many cases, but they are also distinct, I mean, in really important ways. And I think that, yeah, that's a really important point, I think, that being dedicated to a certain, I guess, effort can involve other forms of solidarity. And I just feel like I really want to repeat this idea that it's not separate necessarily. There are a lot of people that, of course, live at the intersections of all these different systems of privilege and oppression. It means that they experience them differently sometimes. So, yeah.
And I think, you know, essentially a lot of what we do, let's say at Ken, GSC, Women's WRC, you know, Disability Cultural Center, a lot of our programming workshops are a highlight, right? To highlight what's our shared experience, right? What's our difference? And so we build solidarity, we find commonality, and we build solidarity across difference. And I think, you know, it's really important for, you know, at least for Moises and I, that, you know, when we talk about access, right, equity, these are not just lip service that we give, right, to our colleagues, coworkers, or students and staff and faculty members. This is something that we need to really think carefully and implement in our practice. And it's a commitment. It's not a project of passion, right? Passion comes and go, but if it's a commitment, we think long term how to do better, right? Do you? And so we have. Gosh, I cannot believe that we have 6 more minutes left. This is so exciting. One thing, would you use a couple of minutes to share? You know, is there a mistake or a lesson that you learned in college that you want to share with the audience? Any particular major lesson?
Yeah, I think, okay, let me see. Like sometimes I look back on college and I'm like, wow, I was so, you know, immersed in just ways of thinking about my disability that weren't necessarily that helpful. And it's easy to kind of feel bad about that retroactively, but it's just where I was, you know, and like, I think just be gentle with yourself. I guess that's my advice. And just do the work, like just let yourself be where you are in the process. And I will say that for me at least, and I hope it's somewhat true for most people, just trying out different things, just exposing myself to different things was just so helpful and meaningful. Being open to following what felt great. That sounds like feel good, but you know what I mean? Like just like following, trusting my own sense of like where I felt the most comfortable, the most energized. That was really important and turned out pretty well.
Really appreciate that, Margaret. And also just your vulnerability and your honesty. It's a pleasure to work with you. We work in the same building in BSB, so right now we're working remotely, but when and if it opens, like it'll be great to visit our spaces and just work with you. It's been really a great joy. I appreciate what you've contributed to today's conversation. And so I'm gonna have Ada close us out for the remaining 2 minutes that we have or so.
Very good. Before I close out, Margaret, do you have any words of wisdom you want to share with everybody? Any final words before I close out the show?
No, I mean, I think it's funny that they're so interconnected, like the mistakes and the advice. Like, I really think that, yeah, just letting yourself be where you are and just try to be like, keep reflecting. It's just a process. Just be okay with that, is my advice. And I do want to take my like little time with the mic, to thank you both for having me. This has been super fun to talk with you, and I'm looking forward to the future one-on-one.
Very good. We talked about identity, how to advocate for oneself, be gentle with your own learning process, right? We all made mistakes when we were young. We were exactly where we were, and we are where we are, right? And so, you know, how do we make sure that we continue to grow and learn? That's really the most important thing. Moises, so before I close out, would you like to say a few words about how you're feeling, how you're doing with the interview, and I'll close out.
Yeah, this is, you know, great to have a space where other people can listen to our stories and get to learn a little bit about us. I appreciate that. I think we're now in a different time and place, you know, and I think more folks will hopefully be able to access and learn about our work. So this has been a great opportunity. I'm so excited to work with all of you and our other colleagues too, who also do a lot of great work, who will be featured in different ways throughout the year. So I'm excited, I'm grateful, I'm honored. Anytime I think that we share stories is an important, we're being witnesses, right? And I think that is a really important and special gift. So I take that with me today.
Very good. Thank you so much, Moises. So this is the end of our show. I just want to thank Margaret, for being here and share your stories and lessons and mistakes with us and give us your words of wisdom. And this is so important. And I'm learning a lot just, from doing the show with Moises. I'm learning a lot from him as well. So this is what is going to happen with the interview. We're going to talk to people at UIC. This is about knowing each other's history, knowing each other's stories. Stories are the gifts that we give to one another. This is about building community. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm so glad that I put on my makeup and everything went perfectly. So thank you so much, Moises. Thank you so much, Margaret. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. And join us in 2 weeks for another special guest, and we will announce it on our Facebook. And check out the newly revived Ken Facebook and GSC and Disability Cultural Center. Everybody, thank you. Bye.